Right, video working? Yes, good. Did you get the title for tonight's share?
Yes.
Good. It's actually quite nice. I sent an old friend of mine. I sent him some complaint just back from England. That's why we weren't here last week. So I was complaining about all the stuff, and he wrote back and said, "Yeah, I agree," and blah blah blah. And then he wrote, "Grumpy old men." So, one of the nice things about saying Shiurim is you get to invite people to the table.
More props.
Yeah, more props. Oh, yes, you got to give props. You get to invite people to listen to you grumping. This is one of my chief grumps. I feel very strongly this. We mentioned, by coincidence, it interfaces very nicely with 2 weeks ago, the Indian we were talking about there, which I think was there a mitzvah gedela to be besimcha. Said that in London as well. I've said it now. And London, here, New York, and in Muncie, and I'm still alive. So that's very good news. Anyway, so I mentioned the Manchester Rosh Hashiva and the Norma Tzaddik, sadly whose kever was vandalized recently. But anyway, so I think I told you, when he said the bracha Asher Yotza, which he did from a cedar, it literally took him something to 4 minutes to say the bracha Asher Yotza. Shemona Esra took about an hour. He only ate bread on Shabbos because benching, that just took forever. And the reason I mentioned that, if you remember, we were talking about the idea of, when we're talking about, the idea of being the Simcha Gedan. And I should, incidentally, as we mentioned of Nachman of Bretzlav, tell you that I'm almost sure he would agree with my side. There's a famous story about Rav Nachman of Bretzlav, when one of his Hasidim came to see him, excuse me, because he'd been offered a job, and he wanted a bracha from the Rebbe. This is the right thing. Should I take the job? So the Rebbe listened. And the guy had no parnosa beforehand, and now he had a parnosa. I said, yes, you should take the job. Give him a bracha. Fine. He went away. But something troubled him and worried him, so he came back the next day. He said, Rebbe, I know I've already asked you this, but should I take the job? I said, right, he told you. Of course you should take the job. But the chassid was still troubled, but he came back a third time. He said, Rebbe, emes la'amitoi. Right, in absolute terms, should I take the job? And Rav Nachman said, emes la'amitoi? Of course you shouldn't take the job. What was Rav Nachman's advice to his chassid? To take the job or not take the job?
Not. Take it.
Take it. Take it. A madriga of emes la'mitoi. I mean, we say Pesachah Sedekam Zvi Son. You fed me yesterday. You fed me tomorrow. What am I got to worry about? You can do anything. That's a madriga for somebody like Rav Nachman. But for the chassid, his advice was take the job. Emes la'mitoi. Who exists in the world of emes la'mitoi? Absolute terms. Maybe Rav Nachman, but not the chassid. So the idea of mitzvah gedela Simchat Tamid, which indeed he wrote, as we talked about, that would certainly apply to him. Whether you could say as a general principle to everybody else, I'm not so sure about that, and really we'll reflect on that very shortly as well. And then on the same shir, we quoted the Chasam Sofer, and the Chasam Sofer, if you remember, explained why he was a misnagid. So he wrote, it says there are Shulchan Aruch, and the Shulchan Aruch applies to everybody equally. There is no Shulchan Aruch for Chumras. So to try and pattern, to copy your life on the basis of somebody, to copy the behavior of somebody who is an absolute tzaddik, like the Divrei Yoel, the Belzer Rebbe, the Belzer Rav, people like that. The analogy we drew, if you remember 2 weeks ago, it's like your next door neighbor. There is in our Kehillah, we have a wonderful fellow called David Winselberg, exceptionally nice fellow, who completed the New York Marathon this year. I think that's the second or third time he did it. And he had a little sort of celebration afterwards. And I went round there, and he got a medal. There was a medal, and there was a blanket, and I can't remember, a hat, something like that. So I immediately took a selfie of myself wearing his medal and that and stuff, and I posted this on my Facebook page. Well, it's me. I've got 5,000 friends on Facebook, so I shouldn't be quite so surprised. But the number of people who are writing to me, "Whoa, you did them! How old are you? You did the marathon!" etc. But was I to try and keep up with my dear friend David, who incidentally wants me to do a 30-mile bike ride with him? If your next door neighbour, let's say, was an accomplished multiple marathon runner, and you saw him going out every day and running about 12 miles, and you think, I'm going to do that. So you buy all the gear in some cheap store out, and off you go. Well, how long are you going to be able to keep up with them before you fall down, clutching your chest? Not a lot. But if that's a physical example, and Rabbi Yochanan points out that Chazal say everything in the physical world has a spiritual parallel, then the spiritual world as well. If you try to keep up with the tzaddik, you're going to fall flat in your face. Having said that, the topic we're talking about is, I think we called it the Great Frum Cover-Up Veiled or Veiled Threat, something like that. And Mishpacha magazine, when they dealt with this, and this was a couple of years ago, because of course we cannot have pictures of women in our press, or as we ultra-Orthodox Jews refer to them, non-men. However, in the cover of Mishpacha magazine, which I used to write for, it was really good in those days. Now it's gone completely downhill. But anyway, so they've got this very clever. They got round it by putting a little doll, a little child's doll, and so that's the nearest you'll get in the world. Okay, fine.
Doll liver problem.
Yeah, that's all. Well, they might have taken off a bit of her nose. I'm not terribly sure. That sounds very Islamic.
It's still not as bad as showing a woman.
No, absolutely. But but Haredi male dolls are not allowed to read this edition of the Mishpacha. Anyway, sorry, being silly. Okay, so basically, this phenomenon really hit the headlines about 3 years ago. I think 3 years ago. I assumed that it was exclusive to Eretz Yisrael, but when I was in Muncie. Sorry?
What was his name?
I don't know. I don't know the people involved. We'll see some first names, but I don't know the other people. But in Muncie, there are several families who've taken to this custom. It's not quite reached Inwood at the moment. The 5 towns. Oh, maybe the 5 towns you say Halavai, I'm not sure. But anyway, but you get the oats, and I said that. I was going out. I'm really in trouble. Anyway, okay, so I didn't mean. The last bit was a joke. Said he, okay.
Guatemala.
Sorry?
There was a whole group in Guatemala.
Oh, that's a different thing. That was they were seriously mentally ill. That was a cult. That was what would they call themselves? I don't know. Liftower. That was they did dress like that, but that if that was all that happened to these poor Jews, that would have been actually not so bad. But there was appalling sexual abuse going on there. It was really, really bad. Anyway, let's not get into that. It's a different share perhaps. Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky in his wonderful Sefer Emes the Yaakov. Sorry?
Is it Sikrikim or something?
Sorry?
Sikrikim? What do they call themselves?
I don't know. I'm not an expert in these. Oh, the people who wear these? Oh, you mean, are they in Beit Shemesh as well? Oh, they're all over, particularly in Yerushalayim. I'm not sure. Don't know what they call themselves. No comments, please. So Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky in the Sefer, and this is in Reish Lamed Vav for those at home who are taking notes, and he says, we're now in the Seder of Vayichi. Yaakov Avinu's on his deathbed, and all his children gather around, and they're expecting to get their brachas from Yaakov Avinu. And of course, when he comes to Shimon and Levi, he says, Shimon and Levi, he gives them what for. Right? Well, they went in and they killed the inhabitants of Shechem, and that itself is a whole share if you're interested in the Alshik, and that's absolutely wonderful. We could do that next week if you're interested. However, when he comes to give them the bracha, he cites this, he mentions that he condemns their anger, their behavior, and he says, Achalkum b'Yaakov, they should be split amongst the Klal Yisrael, and I will spread them out amongst Klal Yisrael. So what was Yaakov's diagnosis, or rather his prescription for his 2 sons who had killed? And of course, killing the people who had taken their sister, first of all, raped their sister, then taken her captive, and then refused to give her back. Now, I don't know about you, and maybe it's because I'm Scottish. And there's always the clash between the Glasgow and the Gateshead. But I have to tell you, frankly, gentlemen, if my sister had been kidnapped, raped, and was being held captive, and they weren't giving her back, I would be number 3 with Shimon and Levi going in there and doing an Entebbe, if that's the correct phrase. But anyway, you get the idea. But what is it that Yaakov says to them? He condemns their anger, and then he says, therefore, Shimon, you should be, and I'll read this, poverty goes hand in hand with being a Rebbe, being a teacher, having taught in Yeshiva earlier today. And you only find that level of poverty with Shimon, who are scattered amongst Klal Yisrael, to be the Mechanchim. And Levi also Maser al Agronis, Latrumas, Meisers, and Levi they became Shevet Levi, and they did the avodah of the Beis Hamikdash. So this is, I just think about this for a second. This is Yaakov's prescription for his children who are accused of, or who he accuses of. And of course, the accusation is not that they killed these people; the people deserve to die. The halachas of Bnei Noach, etc., but somebody who goes and does what they did, certainly it's a chiyuv misa. Kidnapping itself, as we know, is considered to be a chiyuv misa for any human being. However, it wasn't that they killed them; it was that they killed them in anger. And if you kill somebody in anger, then you transform yourself from an executioner into a murderer. So Yaakov condemns his sons. Therefore, the accusation is not just murder, but mass murder. They all deserve to die, but your motivation is going to be critical and crucial in this. Rabbi Avram Grzinski, a whole shir on based on Rabbi Avram Grzinski, who was burnt to death, if I remember rightly, by the Nazis, who points out that were you to kill a Molech, a mitzvah, the first mitzvah that Klal Yisrael has to do after the conquest of Eretz Yisrael, were you to kill an Amaleki, because you hated them, then that makes you a murderer. You're not doing a mitzvah, you're doing an affair. If you're doing it as a mitzvah, that's one thing, but if you want to get them, take revenge, that's different. Anyway, so think about this, the accusation of Yaakov to his two sons is that you are mass murderers. So therefore, Shimon, you should become the mechanchim of Klal Yisrael. And Levi, you should become the holy tribe, the priests of Klal Yisrael. Now, I have to tell you, I recall my own high school days in Scotland, at least 3 of my teachers who could have quite easily have qualified as mass murderers. But it seems a very, very strange solution to a problem of being, violent and vicious, to be a mass murderer, and being a mass murderer, for you to be a teacher. And the other one who's accused of the exact same thing, which is Levi, no, you're going to be the holy tribe of Klal Yisrael. Really? However, says Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, what Yaakov Avinu saw was their passion, their kanoias, if it was only contained and constrained within the Daled Amas of Halacha, within what the Torah says it should be, would be the most wonderful thing. There is nothing worse than a Rebbe, than a teacher, teaching Torah, or really any subject Ahavdil, who is not passionate about his subject. If you think back for a second about the best teachers you've ever had in your life, whether it's secular subjects or religious subjects, I'm almost willing to bet a large amount of money, or single malt whiskey, that they were without doubt the ones who were passionate. Because the Yotzim Nalev, Nichnosim Nalev, the ones that got you, the ones who totally believed, even in mathematics, anybody could be passionate in mathematics, but actually some might were, then that passion spills over into you as well. There's nothing worse than a Rebbe who's teaching, comes into the classroom, right, okay, turn to page 42 in your book, read the chapter. But the teacher, wow, today we're going to look at page 42. Then it's totally different. Similarly, there's nothing worse than a religious leader, a Kohen, a Levi, who is not frum. Nothing worse than that. I've known some people like that. But if they're passionate, so what happened to this kanois? What happened to the passion of Shimon and Levi? It's interesting that Levi's kanois only ever re-emerges within the Daled Amos of Halacha and at the invitation of the Gadol Hador. So that when after the Egel Azov, then when Moshe Rabbeinu says Mir Hashem Elai, and Levi come, he says, right, now go and kill the people who are responsible for this, and then at the instruction of the Gadol Hador and the invitation of the Gadol Hador, they're now appointed and they become executioners. What happens? So Shimon, now we're talking about the Shimon and Levi are Achim. That's what Yaakov says. In other words, not just you're Achim, because they're all Achim, but you're paired, you are conjoined twins in this midah of Kanois. But what happens to Shimon's Kanois? Well, Levi's Kanois remain constrained and contained in the Daled Amos of Halacha, because when we're in Mitzrayim, they never left Goshen. They never leaked out into general society. But Shimon did. So where do we see his kanois re-emerge? That's the Maisa with Shimon, with Shevet Shimon, Zimri, the Nasi of Shevet Shimon, when he parades his Klal Yisrael gets involved in the horrible Maisa of Shittim. And that's itself worthy of, I think, just attention for a second, because there it says the following. I can't resist telling you an Alshik because this is unbelievably brilliant. See if you can spot what the Alshik is going to say here. It's or his problem. So let's find this. This wasn't part of the share, which is why it isn't marked. Let's see. Good. But Yeshiv Yisrael b'Shittim. This is Kof A in Bamidbar. But Yeshiv Yisrael b'Shittim and Klal Yisrael live in Shittim. But Yochel Am is nice El b'Nice Moab, and the people start to do zinus with the daughters of Moab. But Yikren La'am Zivke Alehem, and the people start to offer sacrifices to their gods. But Yochel Am, and the people eat the sacrifice. Vishtach Alehem, and they bow down to their gods. But Yitzam and Yisrael L'Bal Pa'ar, and Yisrael get involved in Bal Pa'ar. But Yicharaf Hashem b'Yisrael. Hashem's furious with Yisrael. So let me read that again to a little bit more solemnly. Listen carefully. But Yeshiv Yisrael b'Shittim. So the Jewish people encamped in a place called Shittim. But Yochel Ha'am, and the people began Liznois or B'Nas Moab to do Znus with B'Nas Moab. What's Hashem's reaction to this? Sorry? Nothing. Zero. Okay. The Tikren Al-Am L'Sifga Lehem, and now they start to offer sacrifices to their gods. Hashem's reaction? Nothing. The Yochel Ha'am Yishtach Lehem, and the people bow down to their gods. Hashem's reaction? Zero. The Yitzhak Yisrael Bal Pa'ar, and Yisrael get involved in Bal Pa'ar. Yechar Hashem Yisrael. Hashem is angry with Yisrael. So the Alshich says in the first three cases it's Ha'am. He says not the Erev Rab, he says the Hamoin Am, the ordinary Jews, the people who know no better. Hashem doesn't blame them, but when Yisrael is the name that defines the highest levels, then Hashem gets furious as Klal Yisrael. Anyway, good. So there's the whole business that happens after that, and then it says Hashem says go and do something about them. And there's a person from the elite, the Yikarav El Echav Es HaMidyonis, and he parades his girlfriend, or whatever you want to say, Le'eni Moshe, in the eyes of Moshe, Le'eni Koladas Yisrael, and the eyes of the whole of the Jewish people, Behema Balchim Pesach Hayil Moed, and they're crying at the tent of the because they can't remember what to do. They can't remember what the halacha is. And Rashi says, and the other Meforshim say, that he turned around and said to Moshe Rabbeinu, Zu muter li oilo. Is this princess muter to me? You don't call her princess because Zu. This. Is this muter to me or not? And if not, who allowed you to have your shiksa? That's when they forget the halacha, they're very upset. Watch. But Yar Pinchas ben Elazar ben Aaron HaKohen. And Pinchas, son of Elazar ben Aaron HaKohen, from Shevet Levi. But Yaakov mitocha Eda, and he gets up from the middle of the congregation. But Yichach Romach b'Yod, and he takes the spear in his hand. You know what happens next, and he dramatically finishes them off. So if I were to ask you to give me a summary of what happened, right, they forget what the halacha is, they're distressed, and what does Pinchas do? Springs to action. Beautifully said. That's what Rashi says did not happen. But Yar Pinchas, says Rashi, no, it's not your fault. That's what the Pasuk says. But as I've told you many times, what's the Pasuk got to do with Judaism? Once the Torah Shebeksav is analyzed by the Torah Shebal Peh, then you've got Judaism. That's what Rashi says. It's a likut of all the Kazal. But Yar Pinchas, Ra Maisa Veniska Halacha. He saw what had gone on, and he remembered the halacha that somebody had done with Pinchas. Ischav Misa. Amen ala Moshe. Did he act then? No. Bal is in Israel. Wait. Amen ala Moshe said to Moshe, Mekoblani mimcha. You who've forgotten the halacha. I remember you teaching me. A boil aram is kanoi pagan boy. That anybody who's boil and aram is a kanoi can get him. Karina de Igrosa, the person who read the death sentence or read the carry it out, miyad, then the yikachrom miyadai. So that somebody who is from Shevet Levi, whose kanois is contained and constrained within the Dalad Amos of Halacha, he has to be the one who does what he does to somebody who's the brother, who's the conjoined twin in this midah, but that midah is not constrained within halacha, who presented his princess in front of Moshe and said, as his mutter to me or not. Not he acted. The Levi's kanois is constrained, and it's always, is this the halachic thing to do? How many people died there? 24,000, wasn't it, if I remember rightly? Kanois that's not constrained within a Torah hashkafa, then that is going to create a plague that will destroy Jewish lives. You may remember a few years ago, there was a fellow called Ahmadinejad. Well, there still is sadly a fellow called Ahmadinejad. And Ahmadinejad organized a conference in Tehran to discuss whether or not the Holocaust took place. And he invited all the usual scholars from the Ku Klux Klan and various other neo-Nazi groups from all over the world. And a delegation arrived from Neturei Karta. Now, in case you don't know very much of Neturei Karta is not, even though it's tiny, but it's not a homogeneous group. There are various dynamics within Neturei Karta. And perhaps the most extreme group within Neturei Karta, who are obviously all rabidly anti-Zionist, but the most extreme group, that's the one who, when there was the Israelis brought to the European Parliament and were debating some sort of Palestinian thing, a bus which had been blown up by a suicide bomber to show exactly what the Jewish people in Israel are suffering from. The other side of the demonstration, there was this group from Neturei Karta protesting against this. And the leader of the group who went to Tehran was somebody called Aaron Cohen. And Aaron Cohen was the MC at my first wedding. I've known him for a very long time. He was not Neturei Karta at the time. He made a Sheva Brachos for us, if I remember correctly. Extremely charming man. Very, very interesting. It's going to be very crucial for our discussion. Aaron Cohen, he was banned by all the shuls. Every Orthodox shul in Manchester banned him except one. I was learning there with my son. I've got a son who's a huge Talmud Chacham, and we used to learn together in the mornings. And he went out to get a coffee, and Aaron Cohen, who was there, came sort of like idling up to me in his very deep and very English voice. He said, Rabbi Hodayana. That's me, by the way. And he said, you're somebody that's in the public eye, because when I was in England, I used to broadcast on radio and TV a lot, still do a bit of radio work even from here. What do you say about what's happening in Lebanon just now? It was the time, I think, of the First or the Second Lebanon War. And he said, you probably have heard about my activities. I said to him, I mean, Hakaras Hatov is very important, and he had been incredibly kind to me, and he is a Talmud Chacham, by the way. I said, I'll tell you the truth, Rabbi Aaron, I try my very best not to hear about your activities. I said to him, look, I do not mind that you're not a Zionist, and frankly, nor am I. I'm against that Jew. However, you do not shake hands with people who get Jewish blood dripping from their hands. Now, people say that he's nuts. He's certainly not nuts. He has a rationale. And he said to me, and if I told you that during the Second World War you had to shake hands with a Nazi colonel in order to do a deal to save Jewish lives, and such deals were done. The Nazis were quite happy to take large amounts of money in their little Swiss bank account. Sorry? In the Castle train, etc., etc. But before that as well, there's like private deal, smaller thing. Would you shake hands to clinch the deal? I said, that's a very good analogy. I said, but let me just tell you that when the Nazis arrived in a town, of course the Jews would be corralled into some ghetto, walls would be built, and then one day they would set up a Judenrat, a Jewish council. In one day a colonel, an SS colonel, would walk and say to the president of the Judenrat, whom I assume was generally well respected in the community, I'm not an expert in this field, but he would say, we need 100 volunteers to work in the forest. So you're already sort of like shaking your boots. So you immediately managed to gather together 100 men who were marched out to the forest, told to dig a big hole, machine gunned, and fall in there dead. And then 2 weeks later, the same colonel comes into your office and says, I want another 100 men. Now, you might have the guts you might have the guts to say what happened to the previous 100. I doubt it, but maybe you'll say that. And he says they were moved to another ghetto. So you supply another 100 men who are taken to the forest and machine gunned into a large hall. But by the third or fourth time the guy comes into your office and demands 100 volunteers, then you know and you become complicit in the destruction of your own people. So I said to him, you just have to be very sure that you've not become a mere fig leaf to cover up their naked anti-Semitism. And then I said to him, you tell me, you name for me one Godel who endorses your approach. Is the Stipler still alive now? Maybe it's Reb Chaim Kanievsky, or Matzil Solomon. Name one. Very interesting. You always, when you're having a debate with somebody, you're having an argument with somebody, when they start to change the paradigm, what you said, then you know they're running for cover. So I said, not everybody who's a Talmud Chochem is known as a Talmud Chochem. He said, I didn't say Talmud Chochem, I said Godel. Which is what I pointed out to him. And then he countered with, if you live in Israel, you're already suspect. So I started to get a bit angry at this, and I said, are you telling me that the Chazon Ish Zichel Tzaddik Livrocha was suspect? He said, the Chazon Ish agreed with most of our Shitas. However, if you live in Eretz Yisrael, you're suspect. Of course, he missed out the fact that Matzio doesn't live in Eretz Yisrael, but leaving that aside. I said, well, in that case, the difference between you and I, Reb Aaron, boils down to a very simple fact. I will accept and listen to the advice and the guidance of the Gedolei Yisrael that Klal Yisrael recognizes as the Gedolei Yisrael. You will listen to the Gedolim that you appoint to be the Gedolim because they reflect your view. He was trying to get me to join the jury charter. I did not join. But Kanoias is a klala. Kanoias, which is not constrained and contained within halacha, kills Jewish lives. And if you're standing in support of Ahmadinejad, Hezbollah, Aaron Cohen's been many times to visit Hezbollah villages in Lebanon, Hamas, etc., you have become complicit. You have become a capo. But Kanoias, which is constrained within, can be the greatest thing. A brain, a passion, there's nothing greater than a teacher who's passionate about his subject. There's nothing greater than a Rav, a Kohen, a Levi, who is a passionate Torah. Which takes us back to this subject here. So, this, as I say, is burst into recent, it's only the last 10 years or so, this has emerged. If you're unfamiliar with the phenomenon, allow me to introduce it to you. So it goes into the whole details here, but because we are all non-women, you might be unfamiliar with the new fashion statement for Orthodox women. Okay, so this paragraph is called "Choose Your Cover." So I hope you're taking notes here. Actually, there's an entire spectrum of cover-up options the women have taken on, from the shawl, an upper body wrap. That's just like a shawl, no big deal. To the radid katan. That's a large shawl that covers both the head and the upper body and pinned or tied at the chin. Where have you seen those? Iran. Okay. The radid is mentioned in the Rambam and other halakhic sources. Okay. Now we're going to have to pause for a second. I'm just looking at the time here. Gosh, this might be a 2-week share. There's a famous letter that was written from the Ben Ish Chai, one of my favourite Gedolim, to, I can't remember who, but one of the Gedolei Ashkenaz was coming to spend time in Baghdad with the Ben Ish Chai. He wrote a letter to the Godel in Ashkenaz saying how excited he was, they're going to be so much Torah, they're going to be discussing together. And at the end of the letter he said, oh, and incidentally, please remember to tell your wife when she comes to Baghdad to wear pants. Pants, right? What he meant was, you see that if you ever go to where I used to live in Brooklyn, in Flatbush, I lived in the East 14th from the H&I, or K&I or something, I can't remember. I'm trying to actually forget about it. But it was just where the Jewish area becomes Islamabad. And you ever see Pakistani ladies, they wear like a skirt thing to their knees, but they're wearing pantaloons underneath. That's what he's talking about. Okay. Now this is a very interesting and important point. That is to say that tznius at the time in Islamic countries, and today as well, is very, very intense. We'll talk more about that shortly. But in those days in Ashkenaz, the time of the Ben Ish Chai, women wore long skirts down to their ankles. You know, they were buttoned up to there. And they usually wore boots, actually, sort of like booty type things. So what's the problem? Nobody would see legs. But tznius,
Stands out.
more than that, tznius is relative. Tznius is relative. That is to say, what is considered tzniistic in one culture might not be considered tzniistic in another. And in Arab countries, women wear skirts and underneath they're wearing pantaloons. The fact that you know that a woman's wearing a skirt and underneath there is a bare leg, right, boom, then that would be provocative in an Arab culture. So make sure you're white. That's what he meant, wearing pants underneath her skirt. Okay? So you have to reflect the culture in which you are living. So the Rambam lived in a Muslim country. So the fact that the Rambam talks about a radid, this large shawl, it was buttoned there because that's what... I mean, we're always a minority. If that's the standard of tznius that applies there, then for a woman to go out with her hair uncovered, or not her face, you know, then that would be certainly pretense compared to that other standard.
So if we lived in Lancaster, we would just like, yeah.
Sorry?
If we lived in Lancaster, we would...
I think, yeah, that's a very important point. Yeah, if we lived, again, that's a minority, but let's say the Amish was a country and we lived there, then certainly, yeah. That would be the levels of tznius that would be expected. So I've never been there, but I think their ladies wear their skirts down to their ankles. Mm-hmm. Then we should as well. Again, from an Amish man seeing you, like our ladies wear skirts to just below the knee, or the knee would be, wow, boomf.
Right, so when we go visit Lancaster and Colombo.
No, again, it's not a country. They're a minority. Right, they're not the country. But if you live in somebody's country, then, you know, Dina Malchus Sadina. But we're talking culture, or Shkofadam, as being an Indian here. But let me read on, because I'm sure you want to know what else you could be wearing. I've only started this. You're missing out the best bits here. So then we've got the Radida Godel. It's the blanket-like cover. It starts at the top of the head, pins the chin. And to the Ra'ala, that's the veil that covers the face. A small group of women have taken on inserting, I love this bit, a cone-shaped piece of foam between the head of the radid in order to blur the shape of the scalp. I mean, because let's face it, this is a men's share, we can be honest here. If you see the curvature of a human scalp and it's a woman, well, I know, you have to come and ask the rock for some sort of like Kapora, what can I do in cold showers and all this stuff. It's ridiculous, okay. Okay, to blur the shape of the scalp, the source of which they say is a one-time custom in Jerba. Oh, good. Is that outside Scotland? Despite the rumours of brainwashing and other cult-like behaviours most women have taken on these stringencies, have come to on their own, following the individual spiritual path while yearning for some kind of elevation. Esther B, who recently added the Radid Katan to her shawl, says that for her, each additional layer she's taken on is an extra layer of Kedusha that engulfs her. But although Esther never looked back, she admits that just learning about the sources for such pious dressing isn't enough to make a woman throw out her twin sets. You have to see if it pulls you. I don't think women will make this leap by logic alone. Logic's got very little to do with this. Esther, a ballister tuba with degrees from university and a music conservatory, said that when she noticed women wearing the shawl in Jerusalem about 5 years ago, her first thought were, why is she like this and I am not? I would like to ask why her first thought wasn't, why am I like this and she's not? But notice there's a certain predisposition that is how she expresses her first thought, but never mind. I didn't think too much about the ramifications about what people would say. I just knew I wanted this level of tznius. Before that, I would agonize over what to wear. Is it too clingy? Is the fabric too sheer? I'd grown up in another world, and I wanted to make sure that none of that immorality stuck to me. Today, a woman has to think 10 times before she gets dressed in modern fashions to go outside. I know when I put on a shawl, I'm safe. Anybody here study psychology? Listen to the language, very, very telling. I know when I put on a shawl, I'm safe, and when I think about how I used to dress Before I was shroom, I feel like I want to wrap 10 shawls around me. This is an article from the Wall Street Journal. When was this? We got a date here. Can't see the date. Yes, here it is, 2011. And it's called "Why We Let Them Dress Like That." The Wall Street Journal is one of the few sane newspapers you have in America, in my opinion. In the pale turquoise ladies' room, they congregate in front of the mirror, reapplying mascara and lip gloss, brushing their hair, straightening their pantyhose, and gossiping. This one is skanky. That one is really cute, and so forth. Dressed in mini dresses, perilously high heels, and glittering dangly earrings, their eyes heavily shadowed in black, pearl, and jade, they look like a flock of tropical birds. A few minutes later, they return to the dance floor where they shake everything they've got under the party lights. But for the most part, there isn't all that much to shake. This particular group of partygoers consists of 12 and 13-year-old girls. Along with their male counterparts, they are celebrating the bat mitzvah of a classmate in a cushy East Coast suburb. In a few years, their attention will turn to the annual ritual of shopping for a prom dress, and by then their fashion taste will advance still more. Having done this now for 2 years with my own daughter, I continue to be amazed by the plunging necklines. I'm not going to go into the clothing that she talks about here, etc. Feathers, slits, and peekaboos. I don't know what a peekaboo is, and I hope you don't know either, and if you do, don't tell me. And try finding a pair of sufficiently promish shoes designed with less than a 2-inch heel. All of which brings me to a question. This, incidentally, this article caused a nuclear explosion at the time. Why do so many of us not only permit our teenage daughters to dress like this, like prostitutes, if we're being honest with ourselves, but pay for them with our own Amex cards? So she then discusses this with some of her friends, why they do it. It was the fashion, blah, blah, blah. I have a different theory, she writes, and this is somebody called Jennifer Moses. It has to do with how conflicted my own generation of women is about our own past, when many of us behaved in ways that we now regret. A woman I know with 2 mature daughters said, if I could do it again, I wouldn't even have slept with my own husband before marriage. Wow. Sex is the most powerful thing there is in our generation. What did we know? We are the first mums in history to grow up with widely available birth control, the first who didn't have to worry about getting pregnant, the first not only to be free of old-fashioned fears about our reputations, blah, 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 blah. Fine. So here we are, the feminist and post-feminist and post-pill generation. We somehow survived our own teen and college years, except for those who didn't. And now, with the exception of some Mormons, evangelicals, and Orthodox Jews, scads of us, I don't know what that word means, scads of us don't know how to teach our own sons and daughters not to give away their bodies so readily we are embarrassed, and we don't want to be, God forbid, hypocrites. It's very interesting. You'll probably find it online. Why do we let them dress like that? With that sort of background, you have to realise that the author of this, this woman that's being interviewed, is a Balas Teshuva, who regrets enormously the world that she comes from. It's a reaction. This is talking about reaction. In her case, it's certainly a reaction. Okay, so that was, who was that we were talking about? We met Esther B. Fine. So, let's go a little bit further. She says, you have to be ready before you take the next step. Esther confides candidly, a year ago I wasn't ready for the Radid, but I davened for it. I want to be Zoicha. Every day I would daven, Hashem, let me be Zoicha to the Radid HaKodesh. Till one day it's no longer seemed Arabic or foreign. Once I merited it, it looked purely Jewish to me, connecting me back to our mothers. Did Sarah Imenu wear anything different? Did Sarah Imenu wear anything different?
I imagine so.
Yeah, I would imagine so, because why did Avram tell her, pretend you're my sister because they see you, the most beautiful woman in history?
They saw the shape of her scalp.
She didn't have a foam insert.
Right.
That's it. 3,500 years of cholesterol. I mean, and that genius. Thank you very much. Sorry, I mean his problem and Avram Avinu, the whole cedra there is because of a lack of foam. Now we know. Okay, right. Some women might be grateful for the spiritual. Now listen, this is very important. Some women might be grateful for the spiritual arousal. Or she's evangelical. She's trying to get your wife to buy foam rubber as well. Others, however, feeling harassed, especially when they respond in the name of their own mainstream Rabbonim, who these women tend to disparage. Remember Pinchas. Pinchas saw something. Pinchas is a Kanoi. It burns within him. It's his DNA. But he asked the God Lador, he asked Moshe Rabbeinu, I remember the halacha. And he said, oh, right, I remember now, you're right. Now go and do it. Then he acted. But I suppose Moshe Rabbeinu was one of these mainstream Rabbonim who they disparage. Who says the Rabbonim are right? Questions Esther. Not understanding how this position could be highly offensive. Highly offensive? Das ist wahr von der Weg, the ganz Klal Yisrael and Torah, Rabbi said. Rabbonim prevent many things that are really bidi eved. And people have their own interest to interpret the Rabbah Psak according to that. Of course, she has no interest in interpreting Psak. Right? Saying I have a Rab is no excuse for not going the extra mile. Esav said the same thing when he wanted to show his wealth to Yaakov. Yeshli Rab. Oh, now she's making up Torah. Oh, it's gewaldig. Perik Gimel, Halacha Yud Aleph, Pirkei Avos. Have a look there. Your Chayv Misa. Her words echo the underlying sentiment shared by the group, a rejection of the norms of virtually all modern-day Gedonim, none of whom instruct and encourage their wives and daughters to dress in this way. Okay. What's Esther's next step? So she's got the foam rubber, she's got the pinned under the thingamajiggy, and flowing, looking like a garbage can. What's next, gentlemen? Gloves! Gloves! Gentlemen, gloves. What's else except gloves? Rabbeinu Yonah wrote that a man can go to Gehenna for looking at the face and hands of a woman.
Call it mistakel, but it's about
Mistakel. Oh, I was going to say that, but you beat me to it. What does mistakel mean?
staring.
Staring, picturing, fantasizing, sexualizing. But, right, so, and incidentally, we're going to come back to in a minute. And so I'm not trying, one has to be very careful here. Moshe Rabbeinu was criticized by Hashem when Korach, when he said, Rab Chem Ben Levi. If somebody wants to go higher, that's okay. But don't forget what happened to them. There's ways to go higher, which is within the Dalad Amos of Halacha, and ways to not go higher. It's about gloves. Okay, Rabbeinu Yonah, that man could go to Gehenna for looking at the face and hands of women, so it's better to cover the hands. I'm not ready for that yet, but I daven to Hashem. One day I'll merit that. And the veil too. Yeah. Well, that's why the Chasm Cypherism is not good. There may be people in such a high spiritual level, although the last millennium or so of Klal Yisrael's existence, millennium, so we haven't. I've never heard of any great rabbits who used to wear gloves because men, might look at our hands. But okay, fine. But it's a reaction. This is a reaction. How are we doing for time? This is definitely going to be a 2-week year. Okay. And then, would you like to meet another one of these ladies? This is Ricky G, who lives in Jerusalem's Beis Yisrael neighborhood, where many of her colleagues are concentrated. So there, it's a hot spot. Explains that according to physics. Okay. Did you know that it's all to do with physics? Einstein used to wear a foam thing. Okay. Even the shawl doesn't really hide. Here we go. Even the shawl doesn't really hide the shape of the body. You can still see. That's really sad. You can still see if somebody's fat or thin. Duh. Yeah. Okay. So there's more shell or less shell. Where is this woman? Okay. She's less cylinder. She's a bigger cylinder, or she's a smaller cylinder. I'm sorry to tell you, Ricky, that's not what we're talking about. When men are looking at women, they're not looking to see how cylindrical they are. Anyway, it starts at the top of the head and flows down like a tent. So the Tzuras HaGuf is no longer discernible, thus fulfilling the divine commandment to the woman to be at Snua. This is such amaranth. This is breathtakingly stupid. Ricky explains articulately. Sorry, no, she doesn't. Really means, Snua means really hidden. So the Radid, she's not really hidden, and therefore not really at Snua. Ricky, Snua does not mean hidden. She doesn't even know the translation of the word Snua. Now you're building a whole life and an insanity and a kagan halacha on the basis of this poor, sad individual doesn't know what the word Snua means. Rabbi Dessler does. Chelik Gimel Amita Milio. Atznei Leches Tenei Lishma. It's a posuk. We're all familiar with Atznei Leches. And it's not something which she insists is unique to women. Sneas is something that applies to men and women. Achachet Adam Arishan, says Rabbi Dessler, after the sin of Adam Arishan, when good and evil became amalgamated throughout the fabric of all of the Bria and in us too, you can never achieve the madrega of Lishma, then coming close to Hashem, except if you're doing it b'tznei leches, so that you shouldn't become this goy. What's gaiva about? What one small word is gaiva about in English? I. Gaiva is me, right? In order to be somebody who escapes the effects of Adam Arishan, you have to minimize gaiva, you have to minimize I. Everything has to be b'seisa heaven. Even though you're trying to be a lamed vov tzaddikim, somebody who goes quietly. Rabbi Dessler once came to Glasgow, where I come from. I think he was collecting, and he was in a show called Queen's Park Show, which doesn't exist anymore. And they asked him who he was. So he could have said, I'm the great Rabbi Dessler, Gateshead Kailo. He said, I'm the shamas of the Gateshead Shul. And they treated him like the shamas of the Gateshead Shul. Right? Like, but it was Rabbi Dessler. But suppose you say to yourself, see that? Well, they're bad news. They don't know who I am. Then that itself can defeat you. But the idea is to minimize your I. Okay? It says, if you think that by being a tzniistic person, a private person, you give your money quietly, you do your mitzvahs quietly, nobody knows, you stay up to 3 o'clock in the morning learning Zohar and all that sort of stuff, and you feel, nobody knows how great I am. Then, Harry Sum is going, but then subconsciously you're misgoy, that you're building your I. But that's not bringing you close to Hashem. Which is that which only you're going to bring to Olam Haba. Only if you fight with your Yetzer Hara as hard as you can. And everything you do is just posha. Fine. And then he wants to give a story about somebody else who was considered to be not much, but really was a great tzaddik. But Snei Lechos means that you're doing things for the sake of Hashem and minimizing you. But if you're going around saying how great you are and have people staring at stare at these ladies, there would have to be a chashash, should have to be a shayla that maybe there's a bit of gaiva going on here as well. Let's see. Yeah.
If there wasn't, no one should look at that. Would they not go around somewhere?
So the Rambam says if you fail, being Adam L'Chavero, indeed, you should become a hermit and live in a cave. But you failed. And we talked about this not too long ago, that the Beis Elikim, he points out that the luchais, which of course were of that, then often in shuls you see it above there on the Kodesh, says Aleph Beis Gimel Dalet Hey, that side being Adam Rochem, the second side being Adam Chavere. But of course, the interesting thing is, sometimes they say just the first two words, Anachi Hashem, and then Losi, etc., etc. But the Beis Elikim points out, he was a Rishon, he says, the Mabit, he says that really what it must have meant was, and you see this if you look incidentally, if the article has got them in the back, you can see it, the number of letters that made up the first 10 commandments were hundreds. But the ones on the Bein Odom, the Chavera side, it's Losetzach, Losigna, etc. Right? So it's just 2 words. Indeed, the 2 words that they often put on there, there is only 2 words, more or less, on the Bein Odom Chavera, but the rest is hundreds. So it must be, therefore, there was hundreds on one side and just a few, and it looks weird. So you got big space with nothing round about it, and then millions. So he says, in order to make it balanced, then the Bein Odom Lamokim, you and Hashem, then there were hundreds of words, and this, there wasn't hundreds of words, but they were much bigger to fill the space. So that's the Chiddush L'Mabit. He says, why? The letters are bigger to tell you that Bein Odom L'Chavera is much more difficult to get right. Much more difficult to get right than Bein Odom. So if you are somebody who can't get on with people at all, the Rambam says, okay, go and live in a cave, because you just can't deal with it. But you never, it's like somebody who can't can't breathe, they've got a lung problem, so you have to go to the hospital and stay there the whole time with an oxygen mask on, or you have to be in some sort of enclosed, environment because you're allergic to everything, and there is people who are allergic to everything. You're a disaster. Spiritually, you're a disaster. If you have to hide away from people, you have failed in the majority of what the Torah wants, and that would be really, really bad. Okay, let's carry this on next week because I've actually only got halfway through, and this is very, very geschmack. But we've got to see how fundamentally wrong this is. I mean, sometimes when I'm getting this share, sometimes I can't stop myself laughing because some of it is actually quite funny, like the cone, but a lot of it is actually very, very, very bad. From an inability to understand Pshat to making up your own droshes, and certainly turning around and disparaging Gedolei Yisrael, which is one of our sharing we had not too long ago. I said to you at the time, if I was the Yitzhahara and had absolute carte blanche to do whatever I want, my first attack would be to undermine the Gedolei. We talked about that. Well, let's see if we can go a little bit further in this. And the tragedy is these people want to do more. It's just they want to do more in a way which will ultimately produce less. And that we'll have to try and solve. We'll come back to that next week.
Can I ask you